Welcome to another episode of the Daring to Transcend podcast. Today, we're traveling all the way to Australia to meet with Kendra Parker, and I know you're going to be fascinated by her story, so stay tuned. So today I am really happy to welcome Kendra Parker to the podcast. Kendra was the Global Director of Employee Experience, focused on the future of work for Avanade. She was working to improve the employee experience and influence the climate within which the people of Avanade had worked. She's passionate about creating a culture people can be proud of and a workplace that meets the holistic needs of every employee. Based in Brisbane, Australia, she's held roles from global mobility, HR tech to business HR, and supported business groups within different areas of the company. In her free time, she can be found exploring the coastal beaches and surrounding hinterlands of Australia with her son and husband. So welcome, Kendra. I'm happy to have you here today.
Thanks, Karen. Happy to be here.
So I know you are going through a transition now, which we are going to get back to in a few minutes, but tell me a little bit about how you got into the role that you were in at Avanade and, what your career trajectory was.
Yeah. I was always really proud of it. When I started with Avanade, it was 16 and a half years ago. I had some experience with international education, designing study abroad programs, and I had moved back to Seattle and was looking for a new role, potentially out of the non-for-profit. And a friend of mine gave me really good advice. She said, look up a company that has a good reputation to work for, because at the end of the day, you're just going to be pushing papers across the desk and answering emails. And I thought, okay. So I Googled, and I don't know if it was alphabetical or not, but Avanade was there at the top of the list. And they had a role open for a mobility specialist. They needed someone to come in and help create their relocation program. And I had this international travel experience. It was a very quick interview. I think within 2 weeks, I had my first day. Yay. And I loved it. I loved that it was a space that I didn't really know that much about. I really threw myself in. I think day 3, I was attending a local meetup with other relocation specialists. I pursued my global mobility specialist certification within the first year. And it really suited my, personal ability to just really focus and dive into a new space. And so I created a policy. I'm very proud that it was still the one that's been used today. I've used it myself, moving to London with the company and then to Australia. But I knew early on that it was probably not the space I was massively passionate about. I do really like to explore new things. And so I've always really created the opportunities and really been open to opportunities to explore different avenues. And I really like to share with people how I feel very much that I crafted a career within the organization by continually exploring new spaces. So from mobility, I moved into HR tech, which was definitely not my strong suit. I like to call it my kind of geeking out. I learned some HTML. I learned some SQL Server querying. And I really enjoyed that kind of more left brain focused work. But I found that I was building relationships with people in very much that help desk kind of capacity. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't longer term. And I wanted to really build relationships. And so I moved into business HR. I became a business partner. I managed our West region, our Southwest region for a while, our Microsoft account, moved into business HR. And then I went to my sponsor, who happened to be our chief people officer. And I said, I feel like I'm on this trajectory in business HR. We've discussed my desire to move to Australia, and we've talked about this role of business lead for Australia HR. I don't think that's really what I want to do. I feel like we need to explore employee experience. I think we need an EX team here within the organization, and it's something I'd really like to participate in. Fast forward 6 months, she started to build the team. COVID hit, and I got tapped on the shoulder and asked, hey, can you help us think about this thing called COVID? How do we respond to it? And how do we think about the future of work in the long term for our people? And that's how I got the role that I was in up until recently.
And I love that. Can I interrupt you for 1 second and ask you a question? So, the whole idea of creating this employee experience role, where did you get that idea? Like, why did you go to your boss and ask about that?
There were two things. One, in the business HR role, I'd done it for a long time. Really been that kind of autonomous HR leader within the region, had a great seat at the table with my leadership teams. And I'd come from a really powerful experience working with our Microsoft leaders, as well as the West region. And I knew that was important, but I kind of felt like I conquered that, I guess, in some ways.
Yes.
Like I was ready for a new challenge. I went to a conference in London, and it was a really interesting one because it was like facilities. So it was really talking about workplace as well as leadership and development. So they had a lot of learning, kind of third-party learning organizations there and leadership organizations, and then this idea of employee experience. And there was a gentleman there who gave a great presentation. And in it, he started talking about this idea of the way the world was going to evolve and the role HR would play within organizations, because we know that technology is going to continue to expand and be more pervasive in the work that we do. Mm-hmm. But we also know that while there is this fear that it might replace people, and we've certainly seen that recently, in reality, while it will change us, we will not necessarily change. Human needs will continue to remain the same. And that message struck me so deeply. And I thought, yes, as I'm on this personal mission to understand my purpose and my, what motivates me and what fulfills me, that is a topic I want to get a little bit more deep into and craft an experience where employees get to experience that, versus some of the day-to-day task-oriented, business-oriented business HR.
Yeah, and I love that. I mean, I love that you could go, and get that information outside and then create a vision, not only for yourself, but for your organization, right? And it is so important. And so many people are very uneasy at this point in time about how technology may change work or is changing work. And, obviously we've been through this numerous times where new disruptive technologies come in. And to your point, we're still human. At the end of the day, we're still human and we still have our human needs.
We do. And I think if you look at the climate right now, I mean, obviously AI, we're in a very unknown kind of space. We're figuring things out. But, and you've got people who sit on both kind of camps. One, that AI is really meant to kind of leverage the strengths of human intelligence, and the other that say it will kind of replace it. I think that the reality is that, again, humans will always remain human. And so the fact that we are driven by intrinsic ideas, that we have innate gifts, and, that we want fulfillment and satisfaction. And I think what's really interesting is that those ideas have always existed. But if you look at kind of historically, and I think Simon Sinek, or actually, sorry, I think it's Daniel Pink, talks about this in an interview with Oprah, about how many people kind of hit their age of 60 and they start reflecting back on how they're really going to make an impact in life. Well, that conversation is starting at 40. It's starting at 30 for some generations. It's starting at 20 for these new generations. They are coming into the world immediately thinking about what sort of impact they're going to make and how they're going to craft a life that is fulfilled and meaningful, and understanding what motivates them. And so you see the whole world changing and shifting to maybe some of these more human-centric ideas. And if we think about what COVID did, it really, really kind of changed the swing of the pendulum. It gave us this new motivation because we very clearly have moved from this workplace-centric model to a worker-centric model. And so we hear companies talking about the power of their people, but now it's, okay, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, I was going to say,
leverage that.
Yeah,
how are you?
A lot of people talk about that, but a lot of it is just talk, right? A lot of it is just talk. Partially because, to your point, people don't necessarily know what that means or how to do that, and they need obviously people like you who can dive in and help inform that conversation.
Yeah, and
it sounds like it's what you did at Avenat.
It is, and it's where I really tried to lean into programs that are going to make a impact to the human life, right? Not just to their work life, but to the entire existence of that they live. So we offered things like, we started with COVID, we started talking about more informal flexibility. We created a program around a 4-day work week. We launched a program we called Roaming, knowing that there were a lot of people out there like myself who were living in foreign countries, and COVID, prevented us from being able to travel and to see our families. And as those restrictions lifted, we wanted to give people the ability to be able to work from a foreign location, whether as long as they have the authority to do so. So like I was able to go back to the US and spend 5 weeks over the US summer with my friends and family. And that was so impactful and just, really important. And so providing those more people-centric type programs, you see a lot of companies starting to get a little bit more creative and thinking outside the box. And we have to just continue to put pressure on that, because there are also companies who are saying not everyone come back to the office. We're seeing companies reverse course on that. I think H&R Block just recently came out and said, yep, that was the wrong move to tell you to all come back into the office. We're actually going to go ahead and give you more authority and autonomy to choose what place suits you for the work that you're doing. And I think folks like yourself and your journey and sharing your journey is such a great opportunity for us to understand why more and more people are leaving those corporate environments and creating something different. And that's kind of where I'm at in my life and the next phase that I'm focusing on.
Yeah. And before we jump into that, I want to point out something that you said that I think is really important, or you implied that's really important. And that is, this employee experience isn't a one size fits all thing. And one of the things that I'm very encouraged about is companies that are starting to recognize that what works for one person doesn't necessarily work for another person. And, we're learning that in a lot of arenas. And yes, my cat wants to join the conversation. We're learning that in a lot of arenas, including in like medicine, right? We're learning that one size doesn't fit all, that we're all unique human beings, and that we have to be treated differently. And I think it's hard for employees to get their head around it. I mean, I certainly grew up in an organization where it's like, well, we have to be fair. We have to treat everybody exactly the same because that's fair. Well, is it? I get right. It's like, no, I'm not sure that I always ask that question. Is that really fair? Is it, okay, maybe it's equal, but is it fair? Because different people have different needs. Different people are at different stages of their lives. To your point, different people are living in areas. And I love that, you brought this up, and we're starting to see more and more of let's look at people as individuals and what do they need to be successful, fulfilled, and productive.
And I think that's where, consumerism's going there. So why wouldn't we potentially follow suit? People want a personalized experience. And I think part of that personalization is it's kind of twofold. One is to express yourself in ways that you are organically and authentically want to express to yourself. And that's about understanding your unique gifts and your innate gifts and your unique experiences and being able to articulate those and bring that to the table. That's a really big space that I think needs to continue to be explored, and that falls into personalization. And if you look across employee experience or benefits, you are starting to see organizations acknowledge that, maybe we can't always, of course, we can take into consideration the equality, the equity of the outcomes, but we need to be looking at each individual and providing them opportunities to choose for themselves, right? Provide that a la carte menu so that employees can personalize it to where they are in their life. We, for the first time in history, we've got, I think, 5 generations in the workplace. They're going to have very different needs. And so having these kind of blanket policies or these, this idea that one size fits all is just ludicrous. It's not going to work. You've got to give people the opportunity to choose. And the idea of the Neuro Leadership Institute talks about the idea of choice and how important that idea of choosing is, and that the autonomy, the flexibility, all of that, being able to choose those things is important to us as humans. And so when you provide opportunities for us to personalize the experience, it also then, like I said, aligns with that consumer experience we're getting outside of work, and it's what we as individuals want.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. So you are at a shifting point in your journey. So you are no longer with Avanade, and what's going on with you now?
Yeah. So, like many tech organizations, we have been laying people off, and I suffered that fate, but really welcomed it. I think I've been, like many people, and perhaps it's midlife, who knows, post-COVID, I don't know, reflecting on my career and where my values lie. I have been studying the idea of conscious business. I did a master program through the Conscious Business Institute. And I think all of these things have really seeped into, okay, what is this the experience that I want to continue to have? I've been focusing on the experience for others, but I really need to, I think at this point in my career, focus on the experience that I want to have. What's the impact that I want to have? I think it's beyond these 4 walls. I'm ready to make it bigger. And so I've got a couple of ideas about where I'm going. I've got an entrepreneurial idea that I'm still in kind of research and design phase. But I have launched a podcast. I'm relaunching it actually. So really excited about that. It's called The Like-Minded Radicals with Kendra Parker. And it's about exploring the workplace, what is working, what's not working for folks. Because I'm really inspired by people like yourself who were bold and said, you know what, this doesn't work for me anymore. I want something different. So what's the story of those people who are doing it differently? How can I amplify that message while also providing an avenue for people who are still in that corporate environment to say, well, I don't have to leave my job, but I can craft it differently.
Yeah. And that's what that's one of the things. I mean, as much as I love what I'm doing right now, and I wouldn't change it for the world. But I hear a lot of women like you, like other women who are getting to a point in their lives where we've accumulated a certain amount of wisdom. Yeah, just going to put it that way. And all of a sudden, it's like, it is that this corporate world isn't working for us anymore. And the scary thing is there's a lot of women that I talk to say that, or have already, made the leap out. And I think that's one of the things that, as corporations talk about wanting more women in leadership and wanting more women in the C-suite and on the boards and stuff like that. Well, if the women are leaving at fairly high rate, just as they're entering that time where they're going to be most effective and most valuable, but they're saying, okay, I've had enough. What is the message for the corporate world with that?
Yeah, 100%. And I think, we can't fix it unless we bring that to light and put pressure on organizations, because you're 100% right. There's too many really fantastic, ambitious, intelligent women and men who are getting to the top and going, it's not what I expected. It's not fulfilling my needs, or I'm just over it. Yeah. Personally, I'm kind of over this idea of like professionalism. Like, what does that mean? Right? What math do I have to continue to, and maybe that's I'm exploring my own neurodivergence right now. I think maybe it's an age thing, it's a woman thing, but like we're continually putting these masks on. If you walk into a boardroom where you read some of these memos, it's like, what is this language that we're using? We are starting to recognize, okay, we started with this idea that work is not a location. Great. So we're kind of, and then that has kind of led to this, well, then I guess I probably don't need to wear my 5-piece suit. Maybe I can wear more comfortable clothes and you'll see that I can still do the job. But I feel like we're going to continue maybe to remove some of those layers, because I think if you ask a lot of those women or those men who have left, these are some of the things, at least from my perspective, that we're kind of just over. And I don't think those are things younger generations are going to put up with, is this thought, this use of this, frankly, language that's overcomplicated. And it's really about feeding our own egos to sound smart so that we, and we're moving into this new phase where these younger generations have a growth mindset. They don't need to be trained on it. And they just want to talk frankly and, solve problems and collaborate together and connect with people. But they don't quite know how to do that yet because we haven't quite shown them some of those things. But yeah, I think there's a lot that we can change, but the point is to listen to the people who have left, because clearly it's not working for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I was joking the other day with someone, and podcast listeners, forgive me if I'm repeating this to you, but I was saying something the other day, but, even something as simple as like the way I'm wearing my hair right now. Okay, it's not is that radical? It's not crazy, but I probably couldn't have worn it this way when I was in the workplace. Yeah, because it's a little too funky, as people call it. And I mean, obviously, there's nothing really that crazy about it, but at the same time, it's not quite that. It doesn't quite fall into that professional category. And there are so many things about how we are put into boxes, and I think that used to frustrate me a lot when I was in the corporate world. Because you've had the org chart full of literally boxes, right? And we're like, okay, let's create this org chart and then put people in these boxes. And I was like, well, but that people don't necessarily. I didn't fit in any of those boxes. I mean, let's be real. I didn't fit into those boxes. A lot of people didn't fit in those boxes, and so it's always a matter of, how do we get people to do what they like to do, to contribute at the highest levels? Yes, we have to fill all the gaps of all the jobs that have to be done. There's no doubt about that. But people are diverse and dynamic and talented in different ways that don't necessarily fit in the boxes. I had a conversation with a woman the other day who's looking for a job, and she's like, but especially now with AI, right? Okay, my resume has to check all the boxes on this thing or I don't even get through. And it's like, well, there's the whole, and I'm not, totally bashing AI. There's certainly benefits to it from that standpoint, but it also can't read between the lines, right? It can't read between the lines like humans can.
It can't, and it's so nuanced. And then if I do create a resume that hits all of the key words and that is perfect for the AI, does that mean the role's right for me? No, like,
not necessarily. Yeah.
This idea that that we are, like you said, forcing people into these boxes instead of thinking about what is the work that needs to be done and who is best equipped to do that. Through my studies with Conscious Business Institute, we talked a lot about a role for my soul, right? Like, and I think again, that comes back to this idea of the thing that I see lacking in the corporate world are two things. One is this ability to articulate my strengths and the value that I bring. When is that taught? I see it somewhat taught in some of the leadership programs. I was fortunate enough to do a leadership program for women. We talked about values. I'm a huge fan of strength finders, but I'm also a fan of things like Enneagram. There's another modality that's definitely on the woo side called human design. And, these are all opportunities, and these have been really profound for me to understand. These are the gifts that I was given. This is the strengths that I have, and I can sit at the table and articulate the strategic value that I'm going to bring, how my adaptability will play nicely in this role and how it might, hinder me. But having the ability to have that conversation is lacking in corporate. The second piece is we have to know ourselves, but we also have to create teams of people and understand what are the outcomes that we're driving to, what's the work that needs to be done, and then who is best suited to do that work. We are so focused on creating these roles and then trying to find someone who might fit into it, instead of looking at a little bit more holistically, what is the work this team needs to accomplish? And then how do they break that up amongst the individuals who have the right skills to do that and the desire to do that? And when you figure those two things out, you have people who show up and go, I love my company because they've helped me find my purpose. They've helped me understand what motivates me. And I feel like I get to explore all of these things within the work that I do. Yeah. And I get to do the work that I'm good at, which makes me feel really good about showing up every day and continuing to find new avenues to expand my skill set and broaden my impact. If I worked for an organization that could show me those things and provide those opportunities, isn't that what we're all looking to do in the workplace?
100%. And I love that because I used to love to do that. Honestly, I used to love to do that with my teams. I drove some people crazy, but it was like, you could let's just take the marketing team, for example, right? We didn't have a big one, but we had a marketing team, and there was all this work that needed to be done. And there was, people that had this content writer role and this, the roles, but somebody who had the content writer role also actually was better at, doing stuff for the website, right? And somebody that was doing stuff on the website was good at that, but they also could do something with the writing or the graphic design over here. And how do you, without creating chaos, which obviously is the challenge, and at not creating chaos, but without creating chaos, how can you give people the opportunity to grow those skills? Maybe they didn't have them when they came to the organization. They weren't part of their original job description, but they showed an aptitude for it. So how do you let them explore and grow and learn those skills and develop that talent in a way that's, to your point, contributing to the whole team, and then, shift the work around in a way that may be less structured by title.
Yeah. People like to be challenged. We want to show up and we want to contribute. We also want to be seen for the individuals that we are. And back to what we were talking about earlier, I am a holistic being, and I don't want to be, fake and false. I used to always talk about faking it till I make it. And I get that. And I think that's true in some ways. There's this idea of, kind of faking confidence, but I don't want to fake it. I want to be me. And I think that for me is really where my journey shifted when I hit director, and I thought, wow, I've hit this level of success, but I feel very much like I did it the way I was expected to.
Always.
Not the way I was designed to. So what could happen if I lent into these gifts that I was given and really, really focused on, these unique experiences that I have and this perspective that I have that I can bring to the table? What could that life look like? And so that's where I'm transcending, I guess. That's the beginning of my journey.
Yeah. And I think we have to do that. I mean, at some point in our lives, well, we don't have to, but at some point in our lives, many of us get to the point where they do want to transcend, where they do want to, which is literally, rise above all the ways that I've been doing things in the past, look at things from a different perspective and say, how can I expand? How can I recreate? I'm not talking about throwing away your past experience or anything like that, but because that's all become part of who you are too. But how do you get above that and see what really is possible? Because to me, that's what the transcendence is all about, is seeing those possibilities that we don't see when we're too far into things.
So far in. And I think, for me, my 16 and a half year career, was because I was able to continually expand and be challenged and try new roles. I think every 1 to 2 years, I usually had either a promotion into new responsibilities or completely new role. Yeah. And so that's why I was able to stay for so long.
Me too.
But, yeah. And so that's really great. But at a certain point, it's I want to see what life looks like outside of this orange lens and these four walls. And it's really important for people to explore that. We are evolving beings. Mm-hmm. And, some of us maybe are more passionate about personal development than others. But I think if you give people the opportunity to, again, feel seen and recognized, that's really important. And when you give them benefits and services and things that maybe take a little pressure off of their life outside of work,
sure,
that's also really, really beneficial. And COVID and the shifts that we've gone through and AI coming in are all leading us to this point where we need to start recognizing it is about the impact. It's not about how the work gets done. In the past, it was so much about how, and most of us have experienced a command and control, terrible boss who was like, well, that's not how you're supposed to do it. And you're like, but I did it. I did it. I just did it differently than you. We're moving past that but now we need to focus on, well, what is that work that needs to be done? How do we measure that when we can't watch you do the work? How are we measuring doing the work? And is it the right work for them? And so I think that's where the conversation hopefully will start to shift, and AI will really, again, put pressure on that. Employees are putting pressure on that because they're saying, I don't want to come back into the office. So let's talk about my metrics. Let's prove, I think I recently saw an article about, I don't know what the organization was, but a woman who was let go because she didn't do enough keystrokes. She was like, but I met the requirements of the role. And so that, again,
keystrokes? Are you serious?
Yeah. So that, again, those things are putting that pressure on organizations to say, well, we better get really clear about how we are identifying metrics and the impact that people bring and how we're measuring them, because that's lacking, and that's going to need to get clearer and clearer. And it's how you're going to see.
To be fair, that's not easy. Although, counting keystrokes is clearly a crazy way to do that, because that's it's completely meaningless. But anyway, it's kind of like, back in the days of Charles Dickens, right? When Charles Dickens, one of the reasons his books, his novels are so freaking long is because he got paid by the word, right? He got paid by the word. So the more works he wrote, the more money he made. So his novels are really, really long and really, really wordy. They still have good messages, but sometimes they're hard to slog through because he was getting paid by the word. So it's one of those things that we always look at. You got to look at what you're measuring, what you're rewarding people for. And I know this was always, especially like in a sales organization, right? When you were trying to design sales compensation, which, I did a number of times. It's like, you've got to be really careful and specific about what you're rewarding people for, and what you're telling them not to do, right? So it's both, because those things you're telling people with your reward system or your metrics, you're not only telling people what to do, but you're also telling them what not to do. And sometimes those unintended consequences are deadly.
Huge. And I think with AI, like AI is going to be thinking logically, it's like data. With data, it's what you measure gets done. So if you're measuring the right things, if you're measuring keystrokes, okay, now everyone in that organization knows that keystrokes is the thing. Are they like going to do the trick where they get a mouse and attach it to something so that it's constantly moving? Like, you haven't solved the problem.
No, exactly.
That's exposed.
And that's hard. I mean, it's hard. It's you've got to spend time understanding people's jobs. To your point, you've got to spend time understanding outcomes.
Yeah.
You've got to have very clear expectations. And in some ways, the whole movement away from, okay, you're here working 40 hours a week in an office where I can see you, to your point, to really truly looking at what needs to be done, setting reasonable expectations about the time that it's going to take to do it, and understanding, how that work gets done. Organizations need to spend a lot more time on that, and leaders need to spend a lot more time on that than they have in the past. And there's no getting around that. It seems like a lot of work up front, but if you can get it right, or at least get it close and then be willing to tweak it as you discover what the pitfalls are of it, the longer term benefits are, it's just, absolutely incredible. But you got to do the work up front, which I think is intimidating.
Yeah, it is. And I think, and I think it's difficult because we're not good at those conversations. It's not a hard conversation necessarily, but it can be an intimate conversation. It can be a tricky conversation. But I think if you empower employees to help solve the problem, right? Here's the problem statement. Here's the outcomes that we think we're working towards. Let's decide together what that outcome looks like, and then set those goals and kind of understand how you're going to achieve it, so that we have something concrete to measure your productivity against. And again, allow employees to help solve the problem and solve the problem of how we're going to do this, so that they feel like they have that ability to contribute, which we all like to feel, that they have some autonomy in how it's going to get done. Again, they get to decide how we get there, based on their skill sets and their experiences, and whether or not they need help. I think that's the other thing, is providing proper air cover as you loosen the leash with your employees, as we should be doing. These are adults. We need to be providing more autonomy and choice. But as we loosen that leash, we also need to be checking in and ensuring that, they have the right support that they need, and managing people. So I think leadership looks totally different today than it did 10 years ago, definitely 20 years ago. And again, all of these things that we've experienced in these last 4 years are hopefully going to be the catalyst to really changing. But I think the key is that we need to think about not just how AI impacts our jobs, but how humans are going to continue to be human, and they're going to continue to have the same set of needs, and they're just going to be more vocal about achieving some of those things within the workplace.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I love that. And, obviously we could talk for hours on this conversation. So I'm going to kind of wrap it up and pull it back in, because clearly, this is an area where I think both of us are passionate about. And, the whole idea of this new leadership and, really being able to bring humanity into the workplace. It, the middle piece of my mantra is integrate the whole self, right? And it's really, how do we help people integrate the whole self? And as leaders, we have to do that first ourselves, which is a journey I'm on, and it's clearly a journey you're on. And, that's the first step in the process.
It is. And I love that word of integration. I talk often about, And it's not the same for everyone, but is it work-life balance that you're seeking, or is it work-life integration? Because for me, it's partially integration. I want to be able to take my child to school and drop him off. And then when he's exited the car, have a meeting, right?
Yeah.
Be able to incorporate. And that's what technology brings. And that's, I think, part of unleashing each of our individual potential. When I have that autonomy and that ability to craft a life that I love while doing the work that I love, then I'm not going to necessarily be yearning for something different. So, but that's not for everyone. Some people have to have those harder boundaries and they want to keep the two separate. Again, back to that personalization. But we all have to do the work to understand. And I think it's really easy to get into an organization and fail to know who you are and to try to, you're so focused on conforming to fit into that box that you're not focused on, wait a minute, who am I? What are the things that I'm bringing to the table? What are my needs? What are the boundaries we need to be setting to make this work? How can I be set up for success? How can I, as who I am and holistic being, how do I get set up for success instead of what do I need to do to be successful here in this box?
Yeah, and obviously there's always give and take with that, but because as part of an organization, you still are part of a community, right? And you have to contribute to the community. But to your point, how do you do that in the most effective, authentic way that is still part of the community? And I don't think we haven't had those conversations in the past. And it is exciting that we're having them now.
100%. And I think the world of work is going to look so different, but it does take, again, the pressure of employees, which they're starting to do, and corporations and leaders looking around and saying, okay, what is it that needs to change? Because this is a time for the workplace to transcend. Like this is the opportunity to create something completely different and better. It's time. It's time.
Yeah, it's time. It's time for something amazing. So
yeah.
Thank you so much, Kendra, for being here with us today. This has just been such an amazing conversation. Like I said, we could go on and on, but I know you need to get on with your day and I need to get on with my evening. So we'll wrap this up. But just before we end, if somebody wants to get in touch with you, either to explore what you could do for their organization or hear more about what you're doing, how do they do that?
Yeah, definitely. I'm doing some consulting. So folks can reach out to me at kendra.c.parker@outlook.com. The podcast is The Like-Minded Radicals. It's on all the places that you can get your podcasts. We also do it via video. So it's also on YouTube at The Like-Minded Radicals. And the website is thelikemindedradicals.com. And we will be relaunching that in the next week. So stay tuned for that. Yeah. And Karen, love to have you on the podcast as well. And to join the Radicals.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm all in. Just let me get back from my vacation first.
Perfect. That's good.
So yeah, that sounds awesome. I'm Karen Ann Bulluck, and thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Daring to Transcend. I invite you to reach out to me on LinkedIn or my website or my email, Karen@daringtotranscend, to continue the conversation. And don't forget to follow the YouTube channel to make sure you don't miss another episode with amazing women leaders like Kendra.